What if the greatest turning point in your life doesn't come from a promotion or a project or even a brilliant plan? What if it begins in silence? On a morning when you rise, walk to your window and notice what you have never truly seen. Have you ever paused, really paused, to consider what your window view is saying back to you? Not just what's out there, but what's entering you through it. Because what we see every day, unconsciously, shapes what we expect, what we feel, what we prepare for, or stop preparing for. In the language of classical Feng Shui, a window is not just glass and frame. It's a vessel, a threshold, the quietest mirror we own. And while mirrors reflect the self, windows reflect the world and how ready we are to meet it. Some people rise and see movement, leaves, light, life. Others wake to walls, to dead corners, to gray stillness. One isn't better than the other, but one nourishes your chi, the other gently erodes it. And this isn't just theory. I've met a trader in Singapore whose wealth soared only after he changed his office window so he could see the clouds move. I've met an elder in northern Vietnam who didn't know why his sleep had worsened until someone turned his bed so he could see the moonlight again. Sometimes it's not our ambition that's broken, it's our view. So today we'll explore the secret dialogue between what you see and how your future unfolds, between the story outside your window and the one still unwritten inside your life. And if this reflection stirs something in you, if a quiet part of you already knows your space has something to say, I gently invite you to support this channel. Just one like, one share, or one subscribe helps New Day Mindfulness grow. Not fast, but with intention. We're not here for volume. We're here for depth, for stories told slowly, for spaces honored gently, for reminders that in a noisy world, sometimes the clearest answers arrive through a window just before dawn. Shall we begin? Section 1, the window as a mirror of destiny. In classical Feng Shui, windows are more than mere architectural openings. They are called the eyes of the home, and the metaphor is not poetic fluff. It's energetic principle. Just as the eyes receive light and transmit intention, so too do windows regulate the unseen currents that feed or drain the spirit of a space. A home without conscious windows, blocked, ignored, mistimed, slowly becomes a house that forgets how to breathe. Energy or chi does not flow aimlessly. It looks for rhythm. It responds to natural invitation. And windows, when understood properly, become both entry and dialogue, not just with sunlight, but with vitality itself. They are how your home sees the world, but more than that, they are how the world sees into the heart of your home. In the language of 5 elements, the chi that enters through window is not just generic light. It is yang in the morning, yin in the afternoon, and transitional in the dusk and dawn that hold space for both. Each of these carries its own temperament, its own message. Ignoring this rhythm isn't just a missed opportunity, it's a slow disengagement from the subtle tides that can quietly nourish or drain your life force. Let's begin with the morning, those fragile hours when the air is thinner, when birds begin to stir, and when most of us are still reaching for consciousness. This is the time of ascending yang. It is the chi of clarity, ambition, and the first breath of movement. When you open your window during early day, especially east or southeast facing ones, you are aligning your home with expansion, with courage, with potential. It may not seem like much. A curtain drawn back, a window cracked open, a breeze let in, but this small act is an invitation that ancient households never skipped. Monks who rose before sunup to light incense did so facing open thresholds. Farmers who prepared tools for the day always began with the window ajar, their body moving in harmony with the warmth that was just beginning to touch the land. These weren't rituals of romance. They were rituals of realism. They knew that how the first light entered their space would shape the tone of their decisions. In modern homes, we forget this. We let the blinds stay closed because the air conditioning is running. Or we design homes with windows permanently sealed, mistaking silence for sanctuary. But a home without morning light becomes a home where motivation stagnates. Even in luxury apartments, You'll find residents with dulled eyes, not because life is hard, but because their body hasn't been allowed to sync with what the earth is already doing. In contrast, the late afternoon carries yin, balancing, reflective, restorative. It's the light that softens ambition, that calms fiery decisions, that invites reevaluation. In classical Feng Shui, afternoon qi is for harmonizing the day's activities with emotional intelligence. It's not just about closing the workday, it's about integrating it. Homes that open west-facing windows between 3 and 6 p.m. often report a subtle calm that takes root in family conversations, in evening meals, in how the space feels after dusk. Here's something few people notice until it's pointed out. When you consistently open your windows at the right times, even for 10 or 15 minutes, a shift happens. It's not just in air quality, it's in your blood pressure, your posture, your mental reflexes. The rhythm of decision-making becomes less reactive, more intuitive. There's less overthinking and more knowing, because your body is no longer living out of sync with the invisible tide of your environment. But what happens when this doesn't happen? When windows remain sealed all day? When curtains are drawn not because of light sensitivity, but habit or neglect? The answer is subtle erosion. A house may still look beautiful, sunlight may beam through its glass, but it will feel stale, off, like something is slightly out of tune, even if you can't name it. You'll notice it in the way children play less, in how your thoughts loop, in how meals feel rushed and the night doesn't quite restore. Because just as the lungs need to exhale, a home needs to release and renew. A window that never opens becomes like a breath held too long. It doesn't strengthen the body, it tightens it. Let's get more specific. Imagine two homes identical in design. One opens its east-facing window at dawn, invites in morning sound, lets a plant catch early light. The other keeps the same window closed for weeks, maybe months. In the first, you'll find sharper mental energy, more emotional presence. In the second, even with all other variables held constant, you'll find anxiety build subtly. Sleep is more restless. Conversations loop in circles. Why? Because energy needs rhythm to flow, and windows are its metronome. Now, there's no need to turn this into dogma. Not every window must be opened every day. Not every breeze is safe, especially in polluted cities. But what Feng Shui teaches us is that energy is sensitive to timing and intention. If you can't open a window, light a candle during that time. If you can't let air in, well, let your gaze out. Even visual interaction with nature or movement can partially simulate the effect. What matters is that you acknowledge the passage of qi and honor its pulse. Remember, Feng Shui is not about fear or perfection. It's about relationship, with space, with time, with self. Some viewers have written to me saying they live in basement apartments or city lofts with no opening windows. What can they do? The answer lies in participation. Even simulated flow, a fan blowing gently during yang hours, a mirror angled to catch indirect light, a small bowl of fresh water, refreshed each morning, can create a sense of movement and engagement. It is not about the object, it's about the interaction. One elderly couple I once worked with lived in a narrow home in the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. Their bedroom had no exterior windows, only a high slit near the ceiling. They felt increasingly stuck. Arguments were rising, sleep was fractured, and hope felt distant. They couldn't renovate, but they could acknowledge the pattern. So each morning they placed a small brass bowl on their bedside table, filled with fresh water, and lit a tea light candle for 15 minutes while playing soft nature sounds. No incense, no prayer, just presence. They called it opening their window. 3 weeks in, something shifted. They didn't suddenly win the lottery, but they started walking together again. Their tone softened, their posture lifted. That's the power of aligning with qi, even when the window is metaphorical. Let me pause to emphasize something here, especially for those just beginning this journey. Timing matters, but not as a rule book, as a rhythm. The early morning isn't magical because it's early. It's powerful because the Earth's energy is rising, and you are rising with it. The late afternoon isn't wise because it's afternoon. It's harmonizing because it asks you to reflect while the day still has light left to absorb change. When you start shaping your space around this pulse, life gets quieter, Not boring, not slower, but steadier. And when life is steady, fortune has somewhere to land. You don't have to move to the countryside. You don't need a garden view. You just need to notice. When does your home exhale? When do you? In closing, remember this. Light doesn't just illuminate, it informs. Air doesn't just clean, it communicates. And your windows, humble though they may be, are not background features. They are guides. Begin with just one. A corner window, a small kitchen pane, a shaded office slit. Ask it every day for a week, what are you letting in? And just listen, because in the end, it's not about glass, it's about clarity. Section 2, clear sky, clear future. Not all windows are equal. Some face traffic, some peer into courtyards or walls. And then there are the rare ones that open directly to the sky, either facing no obstruction at all or angled upwards so that the eye is drawn beyond rooftops, beyond busyness, into stillness. These are the windows that don't just bring in light, they stretch the mind. In classical Feng Shui, sky-facing windows are often regarded as conduits of visionary energy, not because the sky gives answers, but because it gives room. Room for possibilities to hover, to land, to take shape in the quiet of your own imagination. A room with a view into open sky doesn't just offer sunlight, it offers scope, space to dream, a buffer between what is and what could be. There's a reason temples and shrines across cultures are often built on hills, ridgelines, or open plains, not just for visibility, but for vision. The ability to see far somehow reminds us that we, too, can think further, feel deeper, stretch beyond the immediate loop of the day's concerns. But in modern cities, where buildings lean into each other and skylines clutter like tangled cords, we forget how much our gaze shapes our internal rhythm. Think of the difference between waking up and seeing ceiling tiles versus waking and seeing shifting clouds, a soft blue, maybe even birds passing by. One tethers the soul to routine. The other invites it to fly, even just a little before the day begins. There's a woman I remember, a primary school teacher in Lisbon, Portugal. Her apartment sat on the third floor of an aging tenement with small, boxy rooms and mismatched furniture inherited from relatives. She was devoted, disciplined, but quietly burnt out. I sleep, she said, but it never feels like I've rested. Her bedroom window faced west, and her bed was pressed against the opposite wall, away from it, facing an empty wardrobe. She barely used the window except to air laundry once a week. One day, not for any mystical reason, but on a quiet whim, she decided to rearrange. It wasn't practical. She lost floor space. But she positioned her bed so that when she woke up, her eyes would meet the rising light over the buildings and the open sky beyond. Just sky. Nothing fancy. Within a week, she wrote in her journal that she felt more awake before even opening her eyes. She stopped hitting snooze. Her lesson plans, usually done in rushed blocks, came easier. She described one afternoon standing by the window with tea, and for the first time in months, she wrote a poem, a skill she had abandoned after university. I didn't force it, she said. The sky just made space. The point here isn't that sky makes magic. It's that clear vision creates quiet momentum. In Feng Shui, this is the energetic principle of Shan, expansiveness. When your eye is regularly met with openness, your nervous system calms, your ideas loosen. Decision-making feels less like pressure and more like shaping clay. This is not a call to move houses or seek mountaintop views. Most people live with limits. But even within those limits, choices can be made. Curtains can be pulled back. Blinds can be lifted. Even a narrow slice of sky, if seen with regularity, becomes a window of restoration. If your home has no sky-facing windows, consider what else you could place in view that evokes space. A painting of the sea, a photo of a mountain range, a mirror angled toward the ceiling where sunlight hits. The subconscious mind is not picky. It responds to cues, and what it sees every morning begins to inform what it expects, what it believes is possible, and what it quietly prepares for. This is also why Feng Shui cautions against keeping heavy or visually cluttered objects near windows. They become symbolic blockages. A dresser that cuts off a window halfway through says, "Only some light is welcome." A stack of storage boxes in front of a window says, "I'm not yet ready to see fully." These are not sins, but they are messages, and messages become patterns. In homes where future planning feels difficult, where people say, "I don't know what's next," or "I feel stuck," I often suggest beginning with the view. Not because the view will show you the answer, but because it will remove the compression around your awareness. It will let your breath stretch, and in that stretch, new thoughts often arrive, not dramatically but quietly, like a heron landing on water, silent but clear. Sky-facing windows also help with release. People who carry heavy decisions, unresolved grief, or stored frustration often report that simply standing in front of an open window at dusk, watching the last of the blue fade, gives them a moment of quiet clarity. Not solution, but space. Not healing, but honoring. In that way, the window becomes a kind of spiritual therapist, silent, always available, offering perspective without judgment. This is especially relevant for those working from home. When your home becomes your workplace, your rest place, your everything place, it's easy for all the energies to blur. But when you have a space that lets you look out, even for 2 minutes between tasks, you remember that you are not bound by the walls, that outside continues, that time moves, that clarity is still an option. For families, it becomes even more crucial. Children who grow up in spaces with natural views often develop different relationship patterns with attention, curiosity, and imagination. A view of sky teaches that not all stimulation is digital. That wonder can arrive without effort. That beauty isn't something bought, it's something seen. So what can you do right now? Begin by standing near your window, especially if it faces sky or open space, for 5 minutes each day. No phone, no agenda. Let your eyes rest in the distance. Let your chest match that openness. And if you feel nothing at first, that's okay. Your body is learning to uncompress. If your window has a view of buildings, look for the highest edge. Follow the roof line to where it stops. Imagine what lives above it. If your view is only trees or alleys, look for the sky between. A sliver is enough. A single square of light is still an invitation. What you see becomes what you believe is available. What you believe shapes what you plan. And what you plan eventually becomes how you live. So if you're trying to create a future of clarity, of possibility, of renewed focus, it might be less about spreadsheets and strategies and more about windows, not just physical ones, but symbolic ones. Openings that let you remember how to hope. Not all fortunes arrive with noise. Some begin with nothing more than a glance at the skyline. Section 3. Quiet land, deep roots. Not every view needs to be grand. Not every window needs to frame the horizon or welcome dramatic light. Sometimes the most nourishing landscapes are the stillest ones. The quiet plots of land, the soft rise of a distant field, the patch of untended garden that has been left to grow without demand. In Feng Shui, these views, those anchored in soil, in low-lying greenery, in cultivated or uncultivated earth, are deeply associated with the earth element. Not just in composition, but in essence, they represent stability. Not the kind of stability that boasts, but the kind that holds. The earth element is not about upward rush. It doesn't blaze or ripple. It doesn't dazzle like fire or flow like water. Its power is different, more subtle, more deliberate. It is about what endures, what carries weight without strain, what stays quietly when everything else shifts. When your bedroom, kitchen, or even workspace offers a view of open land, whether farmland, garden, or just a still patch of grass, there is a certain psychic rooting that begins to occur. You may not notice it at first, but over time you make decisions with more patience. You respond instead of reacting. You hold off rushing into things that would have once pulled you in. This isn't mystical, it's neurological. Human vision evolved on planes. Our sense of balance, orientation, and nervous system regulation all developed in response to stable, grounded views. When the eyes meet still land, the breath often deepens. When the breath deepens, the body remembers its place. And when the body feels held, the mind doesn't scramble. There's a story I often think about. A couple, Thai Vietnamese, mid-40s, lived just outside Chiang Rai in a modest stilt house at the edge of a stretch of farmland. The land wasn't theirs, but it framed their kitchen window, their back porch, their morning view. Their business, handmade textiles and scarves, had grown slowly but steadily over the years. No viral moment, no dramatic leap, just consistent orders, loyal customers, and work that never felt rushed. One day, a family friend visited and casually suggested they sell the house, move to the city, get closer to opportunity. The friend pointed out that their website could work just as well from Bangkok. That traffic would increase, that they were ready for scale. The couple considered it, even consulted a few agents. But something tugged at them. Not fear, not comfort, just a soft resistance that they couldn't quite name. The wife finally put it into words. Every morning, she said, I make tea and I look out at the field. I don't just see soil, I see a rhythm. And it reminds me that slow isn't stuck, that calm isn't lazy, that building doesn't always have to feel like chasing. They stayed not because the field was magical, but because the field reminded them who they were when they weren't trying to prove something. In Feng Shui, views of cultivated or wild land are considered extremely grounding. They remind the subconscious mind of cycles, of tilling, resting, planting, tending, harvesting. These are not erratic energies. They are gentle, faithful ones. And when people live with such views, especially in a space of rest or work, they tend to absorb the pace of the land, not its slowness, but its steadiness. A lot of modern ambition burns out because it tries to run without rooting. People push, stretch, climb without asking. Where am I anchoring from? Where is the weight being held? Grounded views answer that, without speaking, without demanding attention. They simply sit outside your window and hold a quiet mirror to your energy. Are you sprinting without planting? Are you reaching without rooting? In practical terms, even if you don't live near a field or garden, there are ways to simulate this grounding visual. Earth tone palettes, images of cultivated land, terracotta pots with real soil, whether or not you grow anything, ceramic objects in view, a woven mat by the window, all of these cue the earth element. They remind you that abundance doesn't need to rush in. It can arrive through habit, through care, through return. And if you are lucky enough to live somewhere with an actual land view, even if it's a small patch of community garden or an empty lot, treat it like a source of nourishment. Clean the window that faces it. Don't block it with furniture. Let it meet your eyes in the morning, or as you cook, or before sleep. Watch how it calms the part of you that always feels like you're running behind. Because sometimes the most powerful affirmations don't come from mantras or motivation videos. They come from land that says, you are on time. From views that remind you things grow without panic. The earth element doesn't promise speed, but it promises durability. And when that becomes the baseline of your day, when your energy meets the tone of the ground, you begin to make different decisions. Not smaller, just more lasting, more aligned. The couple I mentioned earlier, their business didn't explode, but it never dipped. Their hands still make each item. Their customers still write back with notes. Their lives remain simple but full, not because they sought fortune, but because they let it take root. And sometimes that's the deeper wealth. Not just what comes in, but what stays. Section 4, moving water, moving fortune. There's a quiet truth to water that doesn't need to be taught. We feel it in the way we slow down near streams, in the way we stare for just a bit longer than we mean to, when a pond ripples without being touched. Even children understand, long before they learn the science of it, that water moves stories, that it holds something that doesn't sit still, even when it appears still. In classical Feng Shui, water has long been seen as a symbol of wealth, not because it's shiny or dramatic, but because it mirrors flow. And not all flow is good. The kind of water you live near, or even just see regularly, begins to echo into your emotional and financial tone. Rivers, lakes, streams, they're not good luck charms. They're motion in form. They carry memory. They hold temperature. They conduct vibration. To the untrained eye, a pond is a pond. A stream is just landscape. But energetically, these are constant cues. And your body, whether consciously or not, is always listening. The ancients understood this in terms that didn't require doctrine. They simply observed. A home near gentle, curved water, peaceful family, steady crops, a home near churning rapids, restless dreams, frequent illness, a well-fed pond, clarity, a stagnant pool, rot. These weren't myths. They were patterns. Water that moves clears, water that sits decays. This is not metaphor alone. It's physics. But in energetic terms, it becomes guidance. Still, water in your surroundings might suggest energy that doesn't resolve, emotions that dwell too long, ideas that never quite become action. Over time, a person who stares too often at unmoving water may feel like they are always waiting without knowing for what. But fast, chaotic water is not the solution either. A rushing industrial canal, a loud fountain, a body of water that vibrates with too much sound. These don't calm, they agitate, they scatter. They create energy, yes, but it's energy without direction. In life, that becomes hustle without clarity. Money that comes in but doesn't stay. Conversations that spark but never deepen. The ideal? Flow that meanders. Water that moves gently, circling, touching, pausing. Think koi ponds, lazy rivers, a small stream that doesn't announce itself, but carries life quietly through a space. These are the forms of water that Feng Shui sees not as power tools, but as companions, subtle navigators. They don't demand action, but they invite movement. There is a woman I once met in Hue, a widow, late 60s. Her house faced a koi pond. Not one she built. It had always been there. She told me that after her husband died, she didn't leave the house much, not for sadness, she said, but because she felt blank. Not lost, just outside the rhythm of things. For 2 years, she stopped painting, which mattered more than she let on, because she was a watercolorist, always had been. She told me she would sit on her steps each morning and stare at the pond, not to think, just because it was there. Some days it reflected clouds, some days it caught dragonflies, some days it rained. But the water always moved, even when her thoughts didn't. One afternoon, she noticed a ripple shaped like a tree branch bending. She went inside and found an old brush. Didn't know why. Just started to paint it, not for anyone, just to feel her hand remember. She painted again the next day, and the next. Within 6 months, she was bringing canvases to the corner cafe. People started asking for them. Her grandson built her a little site. Now a handful of her pieces hang in local tea shops. Not because she chased the market, but because her flow returned. The koi pond didn't bring her luck. It reminded her how to move. And that's the key. Water near your home, or visible from your window, shapes how your inner current behaves. If your water source is dry, neglected, or murky, it doesn't mean your fate is sealed, but it means your space may be echoing stagnation. If the flow is violent, it might be amplifying a kind of inner restlessness that doesn't need more fuel. But if you are lucky enough to see even a small patch of moving water, tended, balanced, curved, it might be softening the harder edges of your effort. It might be whispering direction when everything else shouts result. You can echo this movement indoors too. A small tabletop fountain, a bowl with floating petals, a glass pitcher of water changed each morning. These aren't decorative, they're directional. They remind your chi. Don't sit, don't rush, just move. Energy responds to pace. The question is, what's pacing you? In the language of Feng Shui, water governs more than money. It governs ideas, sleep, the ability to respond with grace instead of habit. Water asks you daily, are you letting go where you no longer need to grip? And equally, are you picking up what's calling for your movement? What you face in water, you often mirror in thick thought. So take note of the water that lives near you. Let it teach you what kind of flow you are currently in. And if that flow doesn't feel quite right, shift what you can. Tend to the pond, find the leak, clean the container, move the chair, redirect the gaze. Fortune, like water, rarely arrives in a flood. It slips in where channels are open. It stays where movement is respected. And it grows where nothing is forced. Section 5. The shape of the road, the shape of your life. We don't often look at roads. We use them, drive over them, wait on them, or curse them in traffic. But rarely do we observe them for what they really are: energetic cues. Yet every road that leads to your home or leads away from it is quietly shaping the way your life unfolds. Not through magic, not through fate, but through motion, through rhythm, through the way energy accelerates or slows down before it meets you. In classical Feng Shui, the road in front of a house is not just infrastructure, it is metaphor. It is one of the earliest signs of the type of energy a person will encounter before they even cross your threshold. And more than anything, it is direction made visible. A straight road is efficient, direct, it charges forward. It encourages quick decision-making, high ambition, and a hunger for results. This kind of road, especially when it points directly at a house, can bring with it intensity. Think of it as energy on a deadline. Opportunities may come faster, but so might burnout. Guests might arrive quickly, but linger less. Your own thoughts might leap ahead before they've had time to settle. The straight road is, in essence, yang at full volume. And yet, too much speed in any system creates wear. You can't always stop when you need to. You might see the goal, but miss the nuance. In homes positioned at the end of a straight road, we often find signs of people who feel pressure without knowing its origin. Restlessness in children, overcompensation in work, quick wins followed by quick losses. The road becomes a runway, and while that can be empowering for a season, it is rarely sustainable for a lifetime. Now contrast that with a curved road. The curve introduces pause. It asks energy to sway, to consider, to gather itself before arriving. Homes along winding paths don't just receive energy, they absorb it gently. The curve in Feng Shui is not delay, it is grace. It allows for rhythm, for protection, for the kind of slow, steady build that results in peace rather than spikes. You'll often find that people who live near soft curves or circular roads have a certain patience. Their success may take longer to build, but it's less likely to collapse. Their decisions may be slower, but they are more aligned. And most telling of all, they often describe their lives not as achievements, but as unfolding journeys. I once spoke to an architect in Seoul. He had spent years designing sleek commercial buildings, sharp lines, towering glass, spaces made for efficiency. But after a personal transition, he moved into a small home tucked off a circular walking path. No cars, just a narrow stone curve that hugged the base of a wooded hill. He didn't expect much of the space. It was temporary, he said, but within 6 months, his drawings changed. They became rounder. He started sketching courtyards, communal spaces, quiet nooks designed not to impress, but to hold. Clients began responding differently. Not only did his work attract more interest, it attracted a different kind of client, those who valued longevity over spectacle. He told me he didn't do anything special. He simply walked the circle each morning, let the shape of the road retrain his mind, and slowly his career followed suit. Because shape is not just visual, it is instructional. What surrounds us subtly suggests how we behave. Think of a river. If it crashes straight into your door, would you feel at ease? Or would you brace, wondering what's about to strike? Now imagine that same river curving gently around a bend, slowing before it meets you, whispering before it speaks. This is the essence of good road energy. It does not announce itself, it escorts. The idea here isn't to fear straight roads or idealize curves. It's to notice what path your life has been mimicking. Are things arriving too fast? Are you making choices before you've heard the full question? Or have you become so comfortable with ease that you avoid momentum altogether? The shape of your road might be mirroring your inner navigation. Of course, not everyone can move houses, but awareness allows for compensation. If you live on a straight street, balance it with curves in your home, semicircular rugs, round tables, or meandering garden paths. If your road bends too sharply away, reinforce your front with warm lights, welcoming colors, or plants that guide energy inward. You can't always move the road, but you can shape how it speaks to your space. Energy doesn't just enter through doors. It approaches, it circles, it negotiates, and the path it takes before it arrives will always leave a trace. So the question becomes, Is the shape of your road supporting the shape of your life? Or is it asking for a rerouting, not of pavement, but of pattern? Section 6. The mountain beyond. Silent strength. Some forms speak even when they're silent. Among them, none speak more softly or more powerfully than a mountain. In the tradition of Feng Shui, mountains are considered the cosmic backing of a space. Not just scenery, not just geology, but symbolic protectors, figures of quiet strength. When a home has a mountain at its back, it is said to be supported by the cosmos itself. Not in a mystical sense, but in an energetic one. Mountains don't move, they don't yield. And in a world full of movement, that stillness becomes precious. We often talk about energy as something that flows, but not all energy needs to move. Some is meant to anchor, to hold, and that's the role a mountain plays. Whether it stands physically behind your house or rests symbolically in your space, it becomes the unshakable shape that tells you, you don't need to look behind you, I've got it. You see this principle in old temples across Asia, shrines and monasteries built into the folds of rock and slope. It's no accident. The builders understood that when your back is protected, your front can open. You can lead, you can receive, you can step forward without fear. But most of us don't live near mountains. Our windows open to alleys, highways, or neighboring balconies. And so, the question becomes, what do we do when the land doesn't offer us its natural support? The answer, as always in Feng Shui, is not to force, but to reflect. If you don't have a mountain behind you, you create one. Not by faking it, but by introducing symbolic structures that provide that same psychological and energetic cue. A framed photo of a mountain placed behind your desk chair. A carved stone or sturdy bookshelf anchoring the wall behind your bed. Even a textile and earth tones draped with intention can offer the subconscious a sense of something holds me here. It's not about decoration, it's about relationship, about reminding the body that it doesn't need to be on alert, that it can exhale. I once worked with a client who felt constantly scattered. She had tried meditation, breath work, endless journaling, but still felt like her thoughts were always 2 steps ahead of her ability to catch them. We looked at her home, and everything was bright, airy, full of light, which was beautiful. But behind her desk was a bare white wall, and behind her bed, a window that opened to a row of air conditioners. All forward, no backing. She didn't need more light. She needed depth, weight, a sense that something substantial had her back. So we introduced a tapestry, earthy browns and slate grays. It showed a distant range of mountains, softened by mist. She hung it behind her headboard. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was steady. She began to sleep deeper. Her speech slowed down. Her decisions felt more deliberate. She said it was like having a quiet elder in the room. Not speaking, but watching, holding. Because that's what mountains do. They don't shout their presence, they lend it. Even in language, we reflect this symbolism. We talk about mountain-like patience, about someone being the rock of a family. These are not compliments about agility. They are tributes to the value of stillness, of stability, of being unmoved in the face of motion. In your own space, ask yourself, where is my backing? Not just the literal support of a wall, but the energetic reassurance that tells your nervous system it can rest. That tells your mind it doesn't need to guard every direction. If your workspace feels vulnerable, flank it. If your bed feels exposed, weight it with earth tones or grounded imagery. Not all strength needs to be visible to be felt. The beauty of Feng Shui is that it doesn't demand perfection. It works with symbolism, with suggestion. A mountain image on paper is not the same as a granite peak, but to your energy, it's a cue, a permission slip, a reminder that strength doesn't need to make noise to be effective. And when we anchor our lives to that kind of stillness, when we choose to be supported even symbolically, we start to behave differently. We respond with more clarity. We pause before reacting. We stop rushing into things just to escape discomfort. Because we're no longer running, we're rooted. A mountain, after all, is not a place of escape. It's a place of return. So whether your window looks out onto vast hills or a neighbor's fence, you can still choose your relationship to grounding. You can still shape your environment to say, I am not alone, I am held. Even when I can't see the support, I can feel it. Section 7, signs from nature. Animals as uninvited blessings. There's something profoundly unspoken about the way nature responds to us. We don't often think of it this way. We see wildlife as spontaneous, accidental, whimsical. A bird lands on a balcony, a squirrel darts through the garden, a dragonfly hovers over a bowl of still water. We notice it. Maybe we smile, then we move on. But in the language of space and subtle energy, these moments are not coincidences. They're responses. In classical Feng Shui, it is understood that wildlife is not drawn randomly. Living beings, birds, insects, animals, respond to resonance. They flock to spaces that feel balanced, places where movement and stillness are not at odds, where the environment has no sharp edges of neglect or aggression. Animals may not have language as we do, but they have instincts older than our bricks and electricity. When they enter a space and choose to stay, even briefly, it means something. A type of invisible welcome has been extended. Consider this. You never call a sparrow. It just comes. But it doesn't come everywhere. It doesn't land where chaos vibrates, where the energy is too fractured, too loud. It chooses softness. It chooses safety. In that way, every animal visit is not a visitor. It's a mirror. I remember hearing the story of a woman who lived in a forested pocket of rural Japan. Her home was simple: bamboo mats, faded linens, wood that creaked in the winter. She didn't decorate for design. She arranged for stillness. Her windows opened to quiet wind. Her lights stayed low. And for years, she worked quietly from home, stitching hand-embroidered furoshiki cloths. Sales were modest. She never forced them. One spring, a pair of birds began nesting just outside her porch. Not exotic, not dramatic, just ordinary swallows. But to her, it was a shift. She had lived in that house for over a decade, and never before had birds come so close, so comfortably. She watched them build, feed, settle. Their rhythm echoed hers. Their presence, though small, created a new kind of stillness. Around that same time, something else began to change. Orders increased, not explosively, but steadily. Her designs began to circulate beyond her village. Friends told friends, customers returned. She wasn't chasing success, but it seemed to be gathering. Now, did the birds bring her business? No, that's not the point. But they did signal that something in her environment had shifted, that her space had become not just quiet, but receptive. And when energy receives, it begins to ripple, not just within, but outward. This principle isn't limited to rural life. Even in cities, there are signs: a potted plant that suddenly flowers, a butterfly that pauses on your balcony, the first time a neighborhood cat curls up on your welcome mat. These are not signs in the mystical sense. They are confirmations that something in the rhythm of your space has softened. Why does that matter? Because we live in a culture obsessed with assertion. We think progress comes from doing, from forcing, from hustling harder. But nature does not respond to noise. It responds to tone. When your space carries a frequency of calm that is lived, not staged, living things notice. They sense the absence of resistance, and in that absence, they arrive. This is the heart of Feng Shui, not in rearranging for aesthetic appeal, but in listening deeply to what your space is already saying and what it invites. There's a common mistake in modern design thinking that if you want to make your home more alive, you need to add things: color, objects, more. But often what life really needs is room, the airiness to circulate, the permission to come close. Harmony isn't made from decoration, it's made from attention. So the next time you see a bird near your window, a ladybug on your windowsill, a dog resting at your doorstep, pause. Don't just notice. Consider what that presence reflects. Ask yourself, not with superstition, but with softness, what kind of space am I holding? Am I creating somewhere that invites life in, or one that walls it out? And if the answer feels heavy, don't rush to change it. Just begin to adjust. Let one corner of your home breathe more freely. Let one object go that no longer holds resonance. Let one window stay open a little longer in the morning. Nature notices these shifts, even before you do. Remember, when harmony exists, living beings gather. You don't chase them, they arrive. Section 8. The day you are meant to clean. Cleaning is often framed as a task, a chore, something to check off a list. But in the deeper logic of energy, especially in spaces we call home, cleaning is something else entirely. It is not about appearances, it's about readiness. We talk a great deal about luck, success, and alignment, but rarely do we ask if our physical space is actually capable of holding what we say we want. In Feng Shui, we often speak of balance, of qi, life force, that flows freely or becomes stuck. That movement isn't determined only by how a couch is angled or what color the walls are. Sometimes it's determined by dust. Not literal dust alone, but what it represents. The slow settling of time, neglect, stagnation. A window that hasn't been touched in months doesn't just block light. It blocks the metaphor of sight, of possibility. And when we clean it, we're not just removing dirt, we're reestablishing vision. That's the difference between a clean house and a clear house. There are times when cleaning takes on an especially potent role, times that aren't randomly chosen, but aligned with natural transitions. In classical Feng Shui and in traditional agricultural societies, these are the days when energy shifts in the environment. Seasonal changes like the spring equinox or summer solstice, or subtle lunar movements like the new moon or grain rain. These are not mystical moments. They are energetic pivots. Why do they matter? Because the earth is not static. It breathes. And in these transition points, it exhales something old and inhales something new. When we clean during these times, especially with conscious attention, we're not just clearing space. We're stepping into rhythm with something larger. We are not commanding the universe. We are joining its tempo. The ritual is simple but meaningful. Take a bowl of warm water, add coarse sea salt, not table salt, but something unrefined, and peel from a citrus fruit. Lemon, lime, or orange. This isn't a potion, it's a signal. Salt purifies, citrus energizes. Together they form a symbolic reset. Use this water to clean your windows, your thresholds, the space near your main door. You are not scrubbing away misfortune. You are polishing your ability to receive. In our culture, there's a tendency to seek complexity, to believe that meaningful change requires something dramatic. But subtle practices done with quiet intention often create the most lasting shifts. When you clean your window with salt water on a seasonal transition, you're not hoping for magic. You're saying, I'm available now. That's the power of clarity, not as a thought, but as a scent, a shine, a moment of attention. And yes, energy notices. When a space is freshly wiped, organized, and intentional, it emits a frequency that says, this home is not hiding. And in Feng Shui, just as in life, that's the beginning of invitation. Not to wealth alone, but to breath, to growth, to unburdened thought. Think about how you feel when you walk into a clean room, not sterile, but clear. Your mind exhales, your shoulders lower, you sit differently, you think more easily. This is not because the floor sparkles, it's because the space has released its static. That's what energy does. It listens. And when the room says, I'm ready, things begin to shift. This isn't just theory. In homes where people begin this kind of cleaning, not rushed, not frantic, but reflective, you'll often find a subtle ripple effect. They open their curtains more. They stand taller. They start decluttering other corners than other parts of life. They make overdue calls. They forgive someone. They reapply for something they once gave up on. And they don't attribute these changes to the mop or the lemon, but those were the first steps, the first movement. That's why the act matters more than the result. You're not cleaning to attract a specific outcome. You're cleaning to be ready. A clean home is not proof of perfection. It's proof of attention. And attention, steady, non-performative, quiet, always grows what it touches. So the next time you feel stuck or unsure, or like something good is circling your life but not quite landing, don't reach for luck. Reach for a rag. Prepare space as if something precious is coming. Because in the language of energy, that's not hope, that's readiness. Final, we've spent this time not looking at walls, but at what lives just beyond them. Not at furniture, but at the frame through which energy, perspective, and possibility enter your home. The view outside your window isn't random. It's a mirror of your pace, your presence, your patterns. And it doesn't need to be dramatic to be powerful. A patch of scarcity, a winding road, a shifting shadow on a neighboring rooftop. Each one offers a quiet curriculum, if we're willing to watch. We explored how the quality of light changes not just the atmosphere, but your sense of direction. How still water might stall your momentum, while a gentle flow reawakens it. How curved roads cradle intention, and sharp paths call for courage. How even the presence of a bird can confirm that something somewhere is finally at ease. And how cleanliness, at just the right moment, isn't about scrubbing, it's about signaling this space is ready. None of these views require wealth. None ask you to renovate. All they ask is that you look and that you recognize. What you open your eyes to every morning becomes the landscape of your decisions, your thoughts, your resilience. So tonight or tomorrow morning, when you open your window, ask yourself softly, what story am I letting in? Is it one of calm, of clutter, of possibility? Because your space listens. And before opportunity can knock at the door, it often peers in through the window, just to see how it's received. If this reflection gave you a fresh lens on your home, I gently invite you to share your experience in the comments below. What does your window face? What has it taught you? And if something in this message quietly resonated, I would be deeply grateful if you'd help me continue this journey by liking, sharing, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a calm path toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, not for the sake of numbers, but to keep creating content that respects your inner pace, your quiet questions, your sacred spaces. Thank you for being here, for seeing not just through glass, but through meaning. We'll meet again soon. Until then, may your window stay open and your heart even more so.